Good morning. Welcome to First Parish Unitarian Universalist of Medfield. We're glad you can all be with us on this rainy morning, and special welcome to all of you who are zooming in from home. We're glad you can be with us as well. This congregation first gathered in 1651, settling here on this land that was and is still now the homeland of the Nipmuc, who inhabited this area for thousands of years. And while we realize that we cannot undo the harm that already has been caused to the Nipmuc, we here at First Parish strive to prevent further harm and to find ways to support our Indigenous neighbors, as our faith calls us to do. Our social justice incubator has put together a document with ways that you might help. You'll find a link to this document in your order of service. So friends, holding all of this in our hearts, we welcome you here to this place. Here we search for truth and understanding. Here we celebrate life and we contemplate its mysteries. Here we share healing and wholeness. So whoever you are, wherever you come from, whatever you believe, whomever you love, we welcome you to this congregation. Friends, hear the words of the Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich. Open up the doors, push on looming wooden arches embroidered with ironwork. Brace shoulders against the weight of history unmoved. Slough off the musty smell of unused joy and stored up sorrow. Knock rust off the hinges if you have to, and let your breath precede you inside. Open the doors more. Make room for a shaft of sunlight to cross the threshold. Give the dust mote something to dance about. Peek through a single slice of possibility and name even the half-hidden truths that you see. Open the doors wider still. Pour yourself through the gap. Strut or sneak or sidle as suits you best. Cleanse whatever scrapes your skin and bind up the wounds that keep you from entering whole. Open the doors as far as they will go. Draw on the strength of the stones beneath you. Ground yourself in a firm sense of who you are. Stand as a beacon, welcoming the next seeker, and shine far beyond the lintel and the sill. Open all that you are. Heighten and deepen your connections to the world around you. Broaden your definition of neighbor. Grow into the largest target for grace that you can possibly muster, and pray to become a gateway for even greater love and compassion. Open up the doors, my friends, lest we keep the stranger out and condemn ourselves to prisons of our own making. Open the doors and let us worship together.
This morning's chalice lighting is Our Shared Hope for the World by Pat Uribe Lichty. The chalice we light today is a symbol of our faith. It binds us together as one people, a reminder that our strength is in our shared hope for the world, that our common work is the creation of our beloved community, among ourselves and in the world.
Please rise in body or spirit for the reciting of our covenants. Today we'll be reading lines 1, 2, and 9. Love is the foundation and spirit of our congregation, and we declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity. As people of goodwill, we covenant with one another to embrace the fullest measure of our humanity, showing reverence for the divine within and among all. Please remain standing for our opening hymn, Bring, O Morn, Thy Music. You'll find it in your gray hymnal. It's number 39. You may be seated. All right, well, now I invite Kate forward to lead us in our moment for all ages.
Today, I'm going to read you a poem about hope. It might be a little hard to understand, so we'll go over it a little bit afterwards. Hope is kind of interesting, isn't it? What does it mean to hope? Anyone want to guess? What do you think, Zena?
Like to wish.
Like to wish for something? Do you want to guess? No. What feelings do you get when you hope for something?
Like if you don't get it, kind of angry.
Mm-hmm. Like if you don't get your hope, you'll be sad, and if you get your hope, you'll be. If you get your hope, you'd probably be happy. That's right. If we hope for something and don't do anything to help that hope, will it always happen? Not always, but sometimes it does. The way to make hopes happen is to help. Let's read this poem about hope and see where it takes us. It is a poem called A House Called Tomorrow by Alberto Rios. A House Called Tomorrow. You are not 15 or 12 or 17, you are 100 wild centuries. And 15 bringing with you in every breath and in every step, everyone who has come before you. All the yous that you have been, the mothers of your mother, the fathers of your father. If someone in your family tree was trouble, 100 were not. The bad do not win, not finally, no matter how loud they are. We simply would not be here if that were so. You are made fundamentally from the good. With this knowledge, you never march alone. You are the breaking news of the century. You are the good who has come forward. Through it all, even if so many days feel otherwise. But think, when you as a child learned to speak, it's not that you didn't know words. It's that from the centuries you knew so many, and it's hard to choose the words that will be your own. From those centuries, we human beings bring with us the simple solutions in songs, the river bridges and star charts and song harmonies, all in service to a simple idea, that we can build a house called tomorrow, that we can bring finally into the new day every day is ourselves. And that's all we need to start. That's everything we require to keep going. Look back only for as long as you must, then go forward into the history you will make. Be good, then better. Write books, cure disease, make us proud, make yourself proud. And those who came before you, when you hear thunder, hear it as their applause. Oh, that's kind of a long poem, huh? Okay. Were there any lines when you're looking at the paper? Were there any lines that kind of stuck out to you that made you think?
The last one.
So when you hear thunder, hear it as their applause. That is a good one. I like that one too. Anyone else?
I think the first one is kind of just like, you are not 15 or 12 or 17. You are 100 wild centuries. I just don't understand what that means.
I think what it's saying, this is me, my personal opinion, because the cool thing about poems is that everybody can read it and take something different away from it, is that what that says to me is that you're not just you are everything that came before you. And you don't just carry 10 years, 12 years, 13 years, you carry all the years before you. So you're not just 13, you're 12, you're 11, you're 10, you're 9, you know what I mean? So you're not just 12, you've got all those years before you.
Bad do not win, not finally, no matter how loud they are.
That was my favorite line too, I think. That was a really good one. Zena, do you have a favorite line? Nope, no, we already said it. All right, let's see. What can we take from this poem? What can we take with us from this poem? What do you think? Maybe something we talked about at the very beginning. Maybe some hope we can take with us. We can take a little bit of hope with us. Let's see. This poem I wanted to read because I want it to remind you that there's good in this world and that you guys are the good in this world. And that you should be the good that you see in the world too. Keep bringing those hopes and kindnesses to people, okay? All right, thank you very much. Good job, guys.
All right, let's sing the kiddos out as they head to religious exploration. All right, friends, let's quiet our hearts and minds as we enter into this time of prayer and meditation. Take a moment and notice the sounds around you. Notice the breaths of others here in this sacred space. Notice how you're feeling this morning. This morning, let us center hope, as Kate reminded us this morning. For so much in our world today seems broken, so many angry voices, so much violence, war, and it can feel just downright hopeless. Sometimes we find ourselves feeling weighted down with despair. But yet, even then, there's still hope. We need not look any further than the children here in this congregation. Their laughter, their playing. We find hope in the warming of the ground, of the air, soon knowing the birds will be back, the crocuses will come up. And no matter what's happening way out there beyond our control, we can always find hope right in front of us if we look for it. Let's hold this in our hearts as we enter into a time of silent meditation. Amen. Well, speaking of hope, the theme for our annual fund drive this year is sustaining hope. So to that end, I'd invite forward Duncan Glover to give us an update on where we stand with our fund drive.
Thank you, Rev. Dave. Again, yes, I'm Duncan Glover, a member of the annual fund drive, along with Fritz Fleischman, George Lester, and our co-chairs, Mary Corthell and Don Rolfe. So our fund drive is now in full swing, and we're doing pretty well. So far, we have a goal of $135,000, and we have to date collected or secured $92,000 in pledge commitments from 18 pledge units. So that's about 70% of the way. I guess each one of these accounts for a pledge unit. Are there 18 up there, Don?
There are 18 up there, and slowly filling in congregational footprint.
Great, great. We have a total of 41 pledge units to request commitments from. So with 18 in, we have another 23 to go. And you should have already been contacted by a fund drive leader. If you haven't, please let us know. So our fund drive accounts for 70% of our annual income. that is used to provide for the maintenance and upkeep of this historic building here, and also to fund the programs, many of which are so dear to our hearts. For example, our religious exploration we saw this morning, especially for our children, including coming of age, our music, our social justice, our pastoral care, and of course our Sunday morning services. Thank you for your commitment to First Parish.
Let's hear it for our annual Fund Drive Committee. They've been doing work behind the scenes for most of this church year, and we really thank all the good work you're doing. Well, now I'd invite forward Kay Bennett to share with us the morning's reading.
Religion at its Best by Sarah Gibb Millspaw. Religion is as much about faith in humanity as it is about faith in deity. And many of us will find that over and over our faith in humanity gets tested. We are immersed in a culture that's deeply corrupted by selfishness, greed, and oppression-born privilege and fear. It's all too easy for us to justify the dehumanization, ostracization, suffering, and death of others. It's all too easy for us to devalue other humans' lives and feel somehow like we're still good, upstanding, moral people. Religion at its best asks us to do better than this, to rise above the selfishness and status seeking, the othering and the xenophobia that comes so easily to us. Religion at its best, and our Unitarian Universalist faith, calls us to honor that which is sacred in each person, even those we might hate, even those who we find disgusting. It impels us to accept on faith that there is a sacred spark, a worthy spark in every person. This can sound mundane, but it's very radical and revolutionary even. Each person sacred, each person worthy. Accepting this on faith changes how we live. In this time when so many of us live in fear of a dehumanizing political regime, let us renew our pledge to live out those sacred and humane teachings that draw us toward compassion, love, and justice in ever-widening circles of care.
Thank you, Kay. Well, friends, you may have heard me talk about my childhood a bit before, but I look back on this time with fond memories. As a child, I grew up in this tight-knit neighborhood in Manchester, Connecticut. This was one of those neighborhoods where all the parents knew one another, the doors were never locked, and us kids were free to come and go as we pleased. It was the 1970s, of course, so things were a little different. And if any of us kids got in trouble, all of the parents in the neighborhood who witnessed it would call us out on it. And when we got in trouble, we'd get in even more trouble when we got home. We'd hear about it. We were given a freedom to explore, to make mistakes, and then to learn the very real consequences of our actions. My parents, the neighbors, my teachers, and the adults in my UU congregation instilled in me a deep sense of what was right and what was wrong. They taught me how to be kind, honest, hardworking. Like most of us, I learned at an early age how to get along with my peers, how to treat them with respect, how to help them up when they had fallen. Sometimes I fell short of these things, as we all do, and often I wished I had done things differently. But more often than not, this is when the adults in my life held me accountable. As a kid, I really could care less about political or religious differences. See, what I cared about were if the other kids were nice to me. I cared if we shared things in common. I cared whether they shared their toys with me, if they made me laugh, if they stood up for me. I think as humans, these things are commonly shared. But as adults, we've created these lines of division that have less to do with basic human decency and more to do with which camp we've chosen to be in. Often it's us versus them, it's right versus left, it's Democrat versus Republican, fundamentalist versus liberal, progressive versus conservative. Now, I know that there are, of course, many really upsetting things happening in our world that require us to stand up for what we believe. I understand that when people are hurting, when they're being taken advantage of being discriminated against, it's important that we work to stand up, to make change, to fight for equity and inclusion and justice. But friends, today I'd like to talk about how we do that in a way that still honors the intrinsic worth and dignity of those with whom we disagree. What if we reframed the arguments happening on the world stage in Washington, D.C., and even right here at our local school committee meetings? What if we reframed them as what is right, what is ethical, what is kind, and move away from this conflict between right versus left, and instead focus on what is right versus wrong? If you watch the behavior of many of our elected officials, they seem to have forgotten some of these basic things that we all learned in kindergarten. To tell the truth, to use your words, don't hit, don't take things that don't belong to you, be kind. And where there's an honest disagreement about a policy, how do we not demonize the other, but instead treat them with this basic human decency? Or in UU terms, how do we remember that the person with whom we agree is inherently worthy? Today, I'd like to share a bit of what's happening in our country, but not from a political perspective, but from a religious one, as Kay shared. Even though our UU principles, as we all know, were updated a few years ago and rebranded as our values and covenants, there's, of course, still so much wisdom in our UU principles. Our fifth UU principle is, quote, the right of conscience to use the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large. This is a principle that is embodied by our congregational polity, and it's just a fancy word that simply means the governance structure here in our congregation. As you all know, at each semi-annual and annual meeting, every member of this congregation votes on various measures. You vote to elect an executive board. You vote to call a new minister. This congregation is truly an excellent example of direct democracy. Now imagine if a majority of you voted for the new chair of the executive board and the runner-up who clearly lost, because we saw all of those hands go up and vote. What if they refused to accept the votes? And then it organized all their pals to do everything in their power to become chair in an attempt to, make First Parish great again. I imagine this would tear the congregation apart. Well, our fifth UU principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic processes within our congregation, something we take very seriously, for we know what happens when authoritarianism takes hold. In the words of Michael E. Salwasser, quote, free speech is the cornerstone of democracy. When repressive regimes seize power, speech is the first freedom that they crush. When people rise up, it's because they are emboldened by speech that is free. So as people of faith, we resist the attempt to stifle democracy. Our voices do matter. Our perspectives matter. Our votes matter. For we know from our own experience here at First Parish that the best decisions are always the ones that we make together. For those of you who have been coming to First Parish for a while, I'm often not shy about sharing my perspectives. I believe our UU faith calls us to work to build a more just community, country, and a world with more equity and compassion. Because for far too long, people who look and love like me, those who are white, straight, able-bodied, cisgendered males, have taken and held on to too much power, often to the detriment of everyone else. And not only is that power imbalance unethical, it runs counter to this fifth UU principle. It runs counter to this very idea of democracy. See, democracy is where everyone is supposed to have equal rights, equal votes, to be treated with dignity, where everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed. And I would argue that we as a nation are still very much striving to achieve true democracy, while many are actively trying to undermine it in an attempt to unjustly hold onto their own fading power. And of course, there's much resentment all around. Today in our current climate, in our political discourse, with all the conflict and anger, I wonder if it's possible to step back and learn how we might listen to those with whom we disagree. Where is the common ground? Is there any? As we fight for our beliefs, how do we do that while also honoring that inherent worth and dignity of the other? Today, it can feel like the other is so beyond our understanding that it's hard to even imagine how we might communicate respectfully. Our society has been shifting for decades into separate camps that read different news, that listen to different commentators, that vote for different candidates, and have completely different worldviews. And we're told to pick a side, aren't we? Is it church or science? Is it black lives or blue lives? Trickle down or trickle up? Are you a patriot or are you woke? Our social media algorithms have pushed us even further and further into one direction until the other becomes a monster. And the other becomes evil. The other is destroying society and all that we are. In Lawrence M. Will's book, Not God's People, he deconstructs how, why, and where this idea of the other comes from. He says, quote, "The construction of the other serves to construct the we. The social practices that hold society together are affirmed by the we, while their opposite, which threatens to destroy social bonds, are projected onto the other." What he is saying is that without a common enemy or other, we would simply not exist. Because to have an inside group, you need an outside group. And in this configuration, we all share good, common, ethical values, while they are opposite to us, and they will destroy our values. They are the enemy. Wills continues, "The other has the ability to corrupt or infect the we, and we is vulnerable. The depiction of the other is often unreal, it's distorted, it's monstrous, it's mythical, and it's taboo. While in reality, human beings exhibit multiple and nested identities. Constructing someone as other erases all those identities and instead replaces them with one inaccurate identity." Wills is correct to point out that the depiction of the other is often unreal, it's distorted, it's monstrous. But in reality, human beings exhibit multiple and nested identities, like all of us. I wonder what would cause someone to take up arms against those that they see as an oppressor. I wonder. And I think we can all admit that it is so much easier to to take up arms against an oppressor if we can paint them as evil. I recall personally, some of you may remember being outraged when the presidential election of the year 2000 was too close to call. And then decided by the Supreme Court, even though Al Gore had more of the popular vote counts, it seemed so unfair. It was wrong. It seemed so undemocratic. And I remember thinking, why did 9 justices get to pick the president? I was really angry. And it seemed like the election was stolen from the will of the voters. So, in that context, I can understand perhaps on the other side when they feel equally outraged. Part of me can understand those who raided our Capitol on January 6, 2021. Because if someone I personally trusted, if someone convinced me that an election was fraudulent, well, I'd be furious too. Part of me can understand protesters who are furious about unfair wages, about big corporations controlling their lives. I can understand why you would want to take to the streets and sometimes commit violence. For when folks feel that their voice has been taken away by powers bigger than themselves and by forces beyond their control, as we know from history, they tend to act out. The whole thing can become a powder keg, ready to blow. Well, one thing we for sure have in common with the other is that we all have experienced heightened levels of uncertainty and anxiety recently. It's beyond anything that I recall. And this cumulative anxiety in our culture, in our towns, in our congregation, can have a real effect on how we behave. And when chronic anxiety becomes a cultural norm, dangerous things can happen. In Edwin Friedman's book, The Failure of Nerve, he says, chronic anxiety is systemic. It's deeper and more embracing than community nervousness. Rather than something that resides within the psyche of each one, it's something that can envelop people. Chronic anxiety might be compared to the volatile atmosphere of a room filled with gas fumes, where any sparking incident could set off a conflagration, and where people would then blame the person who struck the match rather than trying to disperse the fumes. Friedman is saying that we have created this noxious environment filled with anxiety. But instead of opening up that window and airing out all of that flammable gas, we run around yelling at one another, trying to blame the one who started the fire. He states that instead of pointing fingers, perhaps instead we should look at where the anxiety comes from. Try to better understand why people are reacting the way they are, to search for what is behind this anxiety. This is really hard work, but our UU faith challenges us to go beyond our comfort zones. The goal of justice, equity, and compassion is core to who we are as UUs. In doing so, we're called to do so with compassion for the oppressor as well as the oppressed. Because our UU faith teaches us every person has inherent worth and dignity. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's what we're called to do. This is the work of our faith tradition and our religious community, building this beloved community in our worlds, in our community, and yes, here at First Parish. From our reading this morning that Kay shared with us, the words of Sarah Gibb Millspaugh, religion at its best and our UU faith calls us to honor that which is sacred in each person, even those we might hate, even those who we might find disgusting. It impels us to accept on faith that there's a sacred spark, a worthy spark in every person. This can sound mundane, but it's very radical. It's revolutionary even, that each person is sacred, each person worthy. So friends, the next time you are struggling to come to terms with something happening in our world, try explaining it to a 5-year-old. Were the people involved being kind? Were they being honest? Were they being a bully? Were they treating others with basic respect? Were they forgetting to use their words and instead use their fists? Because all too often, these complex problems in our world, regardless of our personal perspectives, are simply rooted in what we all know to be right and wrong. So may it be. Amen. Now I'd invite back up Duncan Glover to introduce the morning's offering.
Yes, today's offering will be shared equally with local food pantries. My daughter lives in Hingham, and she married a young guy, Brendan, whose mom was very active and still is in the Hingham Food Pantry. And you would think such a upscale community like Hingham wouldn't need a food pantry, but there are many, many people in Hingham that depend on the food pantry and all the services it provides, bringing the food around to them and opening up their doors. And my wife and I, is one of the things we do is we support that food pantry, and it's the same thing here in Medfield and other communities. So we'll take our offering now. Please donate generously.
Please rise in body or in spirit for our closing hymn. It's number 145 in your gray hymnal, As Tranquil Streams.
Church
is free. And friends, now as we close our sacred time together, prepare ourselves to engage as active members in our democracy. I leave you with the words of the Reverend William J. Barber II. Those of us who have in our history the commonality of suffering from hate, we know that those who won the day are those who chose love in the midst of hate. Friends, go in peace, go in justice, go in love. I'll now extinguish our chalice. May its light and warmth stay with us until we meet again. Here ends our worship. Let our service begin.